Changing is important, right? Especially in an ultra-competitive environment such as the F1 circus, whether it's changing the design of the rear wing or the suspension, or even changing gear. Yeah, it may sound stupid, but changing gear actually is crucial for an F1 car. You can have all the downforce or power you want, but if you mess up the process of changing gear, you can easily spin your car or, worse, crash it. And then the faster you change gear, the faster you'll get around the track. Well, there is one car that forever changed the way of changing, and she didn't only revolutionize F1, but the automotive industry in general, and it all started from a pretty clever Italian bloke. 1987. Since then, Formula 1 saw single-seaters with 6 wheels, or with a fan to increase downforce, or with wings of every shape and form, but in every single car up to then, to change gear you had to press the clutch all the way down, put one hand on the shifting knob, which meant you were going 200 kph or more driving single-handedly, change gear, possibly rev match when downshifting, and then carefully lifting the clutch while pressing the accelerator. Not too much or you would spin, but not too slowly either, as every millisecond counts. We can all agree that's too much of a process for the most advanced racing cars of the planet, but as we can all agree that this method was also the most reliable, I mean, it had been around since the 1890s. Even Dante Alighieri's carriage had a stick shift, so as it was made better and better throughout the years, it was unthinkable to switch to any other method, as that would have meant potentially wasting an entire season or more developing something no one was actually asking for. A move so risky then could have only been there by a hopeless team. A team whose results in the previous seasons were terrible. A team in desperate need of coming back to where they belong. Yeah, you're right, Ferrari. It's crazy how this sentence could be easily used today without being out of place. The Cavallino, in fact, in 1987, probably identified as a donkey, as the car's performance simply weren't there, and Williams, Lotus, McLaren were in a league of their own. That said, they came up with a strategy that, at least this time, wasn't as bad as pitting for slicks in pouring rain, but which was actually far-sighted. They would focus every single resource they had on the 1989 car, which would have come with an intriguing twist, and then quickly upgrade the 1987 single-seater to compete in the 88th season. That year, in fact, was just like 2023. One team won every single GP, McLaren in this case, except for one, not Singapore but Monza, when Senna, after having comfortably kept the first position for the entire Grand Prix, crashed into Williams, opening the door for an as unexpected as undeserved Ferrari 1-2, with Alboreto and Berger. All this, however, was not scaring Maranello's team, because in the red factories under the wise eye of John Barnard, a new prototype was born, the 639, which not only hosted a new NAV12, but also what we came here for, the first ever 7-speed semi-automatic transmission. In the intro though, I said that it was an Italian bloke who started it all, and John Barnard is clearly British, but no, I didn't get swept up in a wave of excessive patriotism, because if it's true that the 639 was the starting point of what will become the first F1 car to use this new and revolutionary transmission, it's also true that it was not Ferrari's first try. 1979. Those were the first years for turbos on F1 cars, and that obviously came with excessive turbo lag, which implied a more careful driving style. With this in mind, Mauro Forghieri, who was Ferrari's technical director at the time, believed if he could find a faster and more precise way of changing gear, which would let a computer do all the hard work, leaving the driver to only worry about turbo's lunacy, preferably with both hands on the steering wheel, he could easily give birth to a title-winning car. And by a substantial margin too. The first option he came up with was modifying a motorcycle transmission and adapting the actuators to fit behind the steering wheel, but for such an hardcore vehicle it would have been too fragile, so Forghieri had to switch to Plan B, which consisted in a completely motorized traditional transmission. To achieve such a complicated contraption, they opted for the same system used in fighter jets to move flaps, and so high-pressure hydraulic actuators, which would manage the clutch and select the desired gear, relying on the clutch pedal just for the starting procedure. There's a tiny little catch though, because I don't know if you know Ferrari's owner, Enzo. Well, he was completely unaware of this project, but there's a reason for this, and that's because he openly hated shots in the dark, and Mauro and his team of engineers were afraid that if he found out what they were doing, he would shut everything down, as with the technology of the time, developing a semi-automatic transmission was not just a shot in the dark, but it was more like trying to do a Rouge flat out with your eye closed, and no steering wheel. Mauro and his team, however, didn't end up at Ferrari by chance like the ones we have now, and in fact in no time a prototype was born. It was fitted to one of the F1 cars of the time, and it was handed to nothing less than Gilles Villeneuve. With Enzo now fully aware of the project, the Canadian drove for exactly 100 laps, each one slightly faster than the manual ones, and with no electrical malfunction whatsoever. But as soon as he stepped out of the car, the engineer's enthusiasm was immediately overcome by Gilles' two main concerns. A technical one, and the worst, a mental one. The former was about the prototype nature of the car he drove, and so with live wires all over the cockpit, which were not really safe, as he stated that he was afraid of electrocuting himself every change of gear. And if Mauro could have easily fixed this problem in the actual and hypothetical official car, there was nothing he or anyone could do for the latter, as Gilles, although he was fully aware of the efficiency of this new method of changing gear, said that he still preferred a good old shifting knob rather than all these electronic components. And if we get serious for a moment, it's true that a manual transmission makes driving way more engaging, but it's also true that Formula 1 is a sport where the only thing that matters is winning, and if an innovation makes your car go faster but less fun to drive, it shouldn't be a problem. Don't get me wrong, I completely understand Gil's point of view, especially if said innovation limits substantially the driver's involvement, but I think the quote, "a manual transmission makes a slow car fun and a fast car slow," speaks for itself. After the test, Gilles told Enzo he'd never want to drive such car ever again, so the Drake immediately ordered to stop any further development on the semi-automatic transmission and to stick with the stick. I'm so sorry. Let's then come back to our beloved 639, because after making sure the system was reliable and functional, it was time to fit it to the real car, the 640, which was still in the designing phase, so Barnard still had time to change his mind, or at least design it in such a way it could return to the manual transmission. But as Matt Armstrong likes to say, there's no half sand, so he made the cockpit so narrow that a stick couldn't physically fit. Then there's the engine, and oh boys, that's an iconic engine. A naturally aspirated 3.5 liter V12, and not with just 2 valves per cylinder, not even 4, but 5, 3 for intake and 2 for exhaust. An engine so good it was later fitted to the F50, obviously a bit tamed and with a greater displacement, but the core is the same. Okay, that's so great, but if we let the track talk, it would say different car, same shit. In fact, although the first race in Brazil was won by ChannelMansell, who then also won in Hungary, and although Gerard Berger managed to win in Portugal, the rest of the calendar is just a big ocean of frit, which means DNF in Italian. And no, they were not caused by incidents. There is something, however, which made that season a bit less worthless, because if we look closer, there's something between the lines of this results table that states the importance and efficiency of this primitive yet still effective semi-automatic transmission, and that's the fact that every time the car actually managed to finish a race, it reached the podium. And keep in mind that sometimes they had problems already in quali, so if we add all this up, a 5th or 6th place would have already been a great achievement, but the advantage that car had was almost unfair, and it was enough to make it to a podium or even a win when it was put in the right conditions. The following year, with the 641, the system was improved and Ferrari could finally fight for something important, winning 6 races out of 16, which is truly remarkable, keeping in mind that the main rival was McLaren with nothing less than Senna behind the steering wheel. Then, for the first title after the one won in 1983, we still have to wait for the Schumacher era in 1999, but this is a completely marginal fact, and at least now the Scuderia was back in the top position, and by doing that, they happen to give the world one of the greatest innovations in car industry, so crucial for any performance-based car that there was a rush between the other teams to fit a semi-automatic transmission to their car, and in just a couple of years the entire grid had one. And if everyone starts to copy your work, it means you've made something that really matters.